Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 866 for the 11th of May, 2025. And if it's your birthday today, happy birthday. And if it's your real birthday today, maybe you'll be listening to this podcast in 10 or 20 years, and you'll say, oh, that was recorded on my birthday. And a big shout out to Pope Leo XIV. I know he listens to the show regularly. And it occurred to me that all those Popal predictions, the predictions of the Pope, poking the Pope, I don't think Rome is going to be incinerated because the Pope is called Leo, or something like that. In fact, the only Popal prediction I heard that sort of came true, or really did come true, was the one I made last week, saying by this time we would have a new Pope, and indeed we do. But popes aside, what's coming up on this week's show? You can count on Adrienne. Oh, yes. Oh, we can count on Adrienne. Of course we can count on Adrienne. And just the other week, they had the We Can Reason conference in Calgary, Canada. And it was my pleasure to be at that conference for the last 2 years, but not this year, unfortunately. Now Adrienne has a roundup with some of the guests and delegates, speakers from We Can Reason. And these were recorded at the wonderful Tyrrell Dinosaur Museum in Drumheller, about, I remember, 2 or 3 hours drive outside of Calgary, and Banff. And it just made me very sorry I wasn't there. It sounded like a wonderful conference, a wonderful lineup, and everybody had a great time. Then find out more with Tim Mendham, with the Book of Tim, about the life and times of Alfred Russel Wallace. He independently conceived the theory of evolution through natural selection. And this is part 3 of a 5-part series all about that famous, or should we say, should be more famous, scientist. Then Adrienne is back to read the Australian Skeptics Newsletter with a very important announcement from Tim Mendham. Oh my goodness, what a shock, what a surprise. Find out more with the Australian Skeptics Newsletter. To round off the show, we head back to the archives and we discover what was going on in 2001 with an Australian skeptics water divining test. Did they find water? Did they find anything? Maybe they found some complaints, which is normal. You can find out more with the Trove segment. Now, apart from finding out about the new Pope, I've had a very interesting week. I've had a very busy week. I have been researching and recording a special guest episode for Skeptoid, Brian Dunning's wonderful podcast you no doubt listen to every week as I do. And what a pleasure it was to listen to the recent episode by our own Kat McLeod. She did a wonderful job on her Skeptoid episode. Have a listen. But my episode, which is about psychic detectives, to give a little bit away, should be coming up very soon. Now this exercise has given me a better understanding, an appreciation of what Brian Dunning does week after week after week, year after year after year, to put together his Skeptoid podcast. And speaking of podcast, a very recent episode of the podcast from Annie McCubbin, Why Smart Women, featured part 1 of an interview with Karen Bickersma. Karen flew up to Sydney about a month ago. Sadly, I was not well at the time and I couldn't greet her in person or see her talk at Skeptics in the Pub, but she went to visit Annie McCubbin's studio, and her interview is very important. It's about how women are in danger and abused from certain men in society, usually their partners. It's not a happy topic, but it's an important one, so I recommend you listen to that episode. And Karen, of course, is the sister of our very own Michelle Bickersma, who did the wonderful series of Logical Fallacies. And you can find that series if you look down the right-hand side at skepticzone.tv. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. I'm going to run downstairs and have a nice tin can of A&W zero sugar root beer. Well, actually, no, I'm not, because it's really hard to find. The only place I know of I can get that is an hour's drive away from the studios. As much as I like it, that's a long drive. I might have to substitute that for a cup of coffee. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill, and right now I am not in Skookum Studios. I'm at the Royal Tyrrell Museum for our annual We Can Reason visit to Drumheller, and I have with me here somebody I met last year at last year's conference. What's your name?
Terrlyn.
And you sell wonderful t-shirts, and you did that again this year.
I sure did. I brought quite a few more this year too as well.
And one of them had, I believe, a Sasquatch on it?
Yes, it had a Sasquatch, and I'm trying to remember if it was the hide and seek champion or I saw a human and no one believed me.
They're wonderful t-shirts, and they sold pretty well, didn't they?
They sure did. Yes, everybody loved it. Looking forward to it again next year.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it as well. And have you ever been to this museum?
No, this is the first time for me.
What are your thoughts so far?
I am surprised I'm in central Alberta and that this exists, and why I have taken so long to come here. This is amazing. Yeah.
And have you enjoyed the conference?
Oh, the conference was awesome. So this is actually the third one for me, and I think this has got to be the favorite so far. So
that's wonderful to hear, because there's only been 3.
There's only been 3, and it's getting better and better every year, and you guys are just doing an amazing job.
Thank you so much. Thanks for talking with me.
Thanks, Adrienne.
Hello, everyone. I have somebody here very special, all the way from Ontario, that came to the We Can Reason conference. And what's your name, and why are you important to the skeptical movement?
So my name is Leslie Rosenblood. I'm a volunteer for the Centre for Inquiry Canada and host of Podcast for Inquiry. We were a sponsor of We Can Reason, and I got to meet everybody here, including you. I'm very happy to have come to the conference. And we're standing right now in the first exhibit hall of the Royal Tyrrell Museum. I just came back from a behind-the-scenes tour where I got to see samples before they are prepared, while they're still encased in rock, and in the middle of the preparation process, and after they're being prepared. So I'm about to walk through the museum itself with eyes knowing what goes on and all of the work involved to create the exhibits that I'm about to see.
And we have some birds and dinosaur noises happening right now. That's a bit weird, but it's fun.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I have heard for years that this is the best museum, dinosaur museum in the world, and I'm very excited to walk through it.
So you've never been here before?
It's going to be a great experience.
Yes. So when you were on the behind-the-scenes tour, something really fun happened. Can you describe what happened?
Sure. So our tour guide, Dr. Scott, was explaining something about a particular fossil that he was explaining, and then he turned to the side, and the person standing right beside me, and he looks at her and says, "Are you Jeannie Scott?" And to which she, of course, said yes. And he said, "I have always wanted to meet you." And then she immediately responded saying, "Oh, I love the work that you've done here, and I've wanted to come here for decades." And there was a moment where there was this mutual admiration society between them, and I just happened to be standing right there. It was a wonderful moment to witness.
That sounds so exciting. I wish I hadn't missed it. But hey, we can't all go. And I went last year, so it's all good. But thank you for telling me that story. That's wonderful.
My pleasure.
So now I have conference chair Janalee Morris with me. How are you feeling?
Hi, Adrienne. I am so happy. What a successful conference we had.
It was pretty amazing. I think the turnout was better than anticipated, and the enthusiasm and the camaraderie was second to none.
The speakers, the speeches, the conference day itself is, of course, really, really important, and we learn a lot. But for me, the more important part is the community that we're building. And it is so gratifying to see more people coming out, more people getting engaged in the skeptical community. It's there's, I think, been no time more important than now to be involved.
Boy, is that an understatement almost. Yeah. And I think one of the things when I was looking out over the crowd that really impressed me were, number one, the number of women, and two, the number of young people. I was very surprised to see not just one or two, but I don't know, half a dozen.
So I noticed some people like bringing their kids to the event. And it's so important because it's something that we've been worried about as we sort of age. Who's gonna take up the torch? And do people see it as important? Do the young people see it as an important thing to engage in? And I hope, unfortunately, in the times that we're in, it's becoming more apparent how important it is. And so it's really gratifying to see the young people, to see women being engaged, to break through some of those glass ceiling and pink ghetto kind of effects that we've had, and women sort of stepping into this space and saying, yeah, we also have a stake in this, have a really big stake in this, and need to have a voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had some wonderful female speakers as well.
We sure did. We started off the day with Susan Gerbeck, who spoke about two things, talked about, psychics and grief vampires and that whole industry, and how actually it is mostly women who are victimized in that industry. Again, which what makes it so important that we can reach women and arm them with skeptical sort of defense mechanisms. And then talked about the great work that you all are doing with Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia, and how many millions and millions of people are being impacted by that information, that good and accurate information, and not being led down the path of dis and misinformation. So that was wonderful. We also had Dr. Eugenie Scott, and what can you say about Dr. Scott? She is brilliant. The work that she has done was groundbreaking and is still so relevant today. Those lessons that we can take from how they were fighting the fight 20 years ago, we need to keep those in mind as we're about to have to fight those fights again.
Yeah, absolutely. And Susan and Eugenie right now are on a private tour, behind-the-scenes tour at the Royal Tyrrell Museum. And I don't think I've seen Eugenie that excited in a while.
I can imagine, as someone who is immersed in evolutionary biology, this is the place to be. It's the hottest ticket in town. And we are so lucky that the wonderful folks here at the Royal Tyrrell Museum arrange these behind-the-scenes tours for our group, get people really, really excited about it, and they let you touch the dinosaur skin and the bones. It's so amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody else gets to do that unless you're on this special tour. And we give a shout out to Brian Kernick for arranging it, and a different Dr. Scott who runs the tour.
That's right. Dr. Craig Scott is so gracious in taking our group through, and he's just an absolute wealth of knowledge. Even for the folks that are scientists who come on the tour, everybody comes out learning something new. So it's really, really a privilege.
We played a short video from Richard, because he, of course, has been at the first two, but was unable to come to this one. And him and Tim Mendham gave us a little hello, and everyone seemed to appreciate it.
We sure did. And Richard, we missed you. It's not the same having a conference without you, so we sure hope we see you next year.
We need more spoon bending.
Yes. Nobody bent a single spoon. Can you imagine?
Thanks, Janalee.
Thank you so much, Adrienne.
I'm standing here in beautiful Banff on the top of a mountain with Dr. Eugenie Scott. It has been such a pleasure touring around with you today. And I just wanted to talk to you about the Week in Reason, as well as what your thoughts of BAMF are.
Well, of course, the highlight of the whole weekend was the Weekend Reason Conference, of course, as you know. No, it was really a wonderful conference. Really, this one speaker after another. I mean, any of them would have been worth the trip alone, even if the rest had been duds. And they weren't. They were all good.
And I agree. And especially Dr. Scott's. I mean, they were all good, but yours was, I guess, sobering is a good way to put it. There were some really uplifting ones, but we sometimes need to take a step back and really look at what's going on.
You know, for a cheerful person, I give really depressing talks. What can we say? But no, I mean, we've had a wonderful, fun time today, this whole weekend, really. And I mean, right now we're standing on a platform looking out over this fabulous vision point for the Rocky Mountain, Canadian Rockies, and they're just spectacular. These lovely craggy peaks covered with snow, and it's a sunny day, and all that's great. But what after the Weekend Reason Conference, what I'm going to remember most about this weekend was yesterday, when we were indoors and out of this bright sun and couldn't see the lovely sparkly snow under the sun or anything like that. We were in the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller, which was something that I've wanted to see for literally decades. You know, when I first heard about it, is this fabulous Alberta dinosaur museum and many other things. And you and I went through it. We had some friends. We had a good time. Everybody kind of kept wondering, where's Jeannie? Because I was always 40 steps behind everybody else. But she's the one who's sort of bouncing up and down and giggling.
Gee, surprise.
Yeah, we had so much. Oh, I was so excited to be there. I really was. I embarrassed everybody. But I came across, and you know, when you go to a museum like that, you know you're going to see casts. And sometimes you're going to see actual original specimens, but you know, these are very valuable skeletons, and they need to be researched, and scholars need to be looking at them, and so it's fine if they use a cast. That was fine. So I'm walking around, some of them are cast, some of them are real, and that's kind of fun. And I came across this one little tiny display, and I thought, oh, it's a fossil bird. And I thought, boy, this is really beautiful casting. I mean, the birds are delicate anyway, but the every single little line was just standing out, and it was just this lovely fragile thing. And so I looked up, and Confuciornis. Oh, that's a very famous original. Not a cast. And literally my heart started beating hard. It was sort of like, a relic, a holy thing. On loan from the Chinese. Yeah, lucky Canada. I don't think they're doing that with U.S. museums. And this was just the most exquisite specimen. And I just sat there thinking how lucky I was to see this, because it was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in I don't know how long.
And I don't think I would have had the same experience without you, because I probably would have not noticed that it wasn't a cast.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, I was admiring what a fine cast it was, and then I thought, oh, wait.
Yeah, you got to read sometimes, too.
Well, you know, this is why I was always 40 feet behind everybody else, because I'm reading all the signage. No one wants to go to a museum with me. No, you were all very patient yesterday, I must say.
I'm a bit of a museum reader, too, but because I have old feet, they sometimes start hurting, so that sometimes stops me from reading, but I do love to read.
You bet. Well, you know, I used to hang out a lot with museum people, and I love museums. And museum people have a phrase to describe visitors. Visitors are either streakers, strollers, or readers. Yes. And we know what kind we are, don't we, Adrienne?
Yes. And every once in a while I get to a museum and they have benches where you can read things. I'm in heaven then.
How civilized.
I know.
Very civilized. That's it. And I feel sorry for the streakers. I kind of want to go and say, no, come back here and take a look. This is just so cool.
It's so interesting. Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. Well, we have to get on to our next thing. We're going to go see the merman next.
Oh, well. What's not to like about that? Let's
exactly.
face it. Maybe he could present it next year's Weekend Reason.
Thanks, Eugenie.
We'll see if he's available.
hallo aan alle Nederlandse luisteraars. Op dit moment bent u aan het luisteren naar de Skeptic Zone voor wetenschap en kritisch nadenken. Voor meer informatie ga naar www.skepticzone.tv.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, I'm Tim Mendham. I'm the editor of the Australian Skeptics magazine, The Skeptic, and executive officer for the organisation. And today, for the Book of Tim, I'll be reading out part 3 of an article that we ran in the magazine in June 2024, and which is volume 44, number 2, although there's not actually in full up on the website yet, but it will be soon. So have a look at that. But this is an article called Unnatural Selection, which is a look at the career of Alfred Russel Wallace. We talked last time about how his background in natural science, as it then was called, and he moved to the East Indies to do exploration and collections of butterflies, etc. He wrote an article we sent to Darwin which really outlined the whole theory of natural selection. Well received, rather a shock to Darwin actually, who'd spent 20 years trying to get his theory up and running. The trouble is, at the same time, Alfred Russel Wallace had propensity to believe in some strange things. And we continue here, for part 3 of this article, with Wallace's look at spiritualism. He did start attending such things. He attended a number of seances, and though he tried to test the spiritualists, he was impressed when they spelled out the name of his dead brothers. That his sister Fanny might have let slip those facts in her earlier sittings seems to have passed unnoticed. In 1866, he self-published his first writing on spiritualism, a 57-page pamphlet titled The Scientific Aspect of the Supernatural, indicating the desirableness of an experimental inquiry by men of science into the alleged powers of clairvoyance and mediums. That was in his 1875 book on miracles and modern spiritualism, which contains a heavily revised version of the pamphlet. In the introduction to this pamphlet, he says, "A single new and strange fact is, on its first announcement, often treated as a miracle, and not believed because it is contrary to the hitherto observed order of nature. Half a dozen such facts, however, constitute a little order of nature for themselves. They may not be a whit more understood than at first, but they cease to be regarded as miracles. Thus it will be with the many thousands of facts which I have culled a few examples here. If but one or two of them are proved to be real, the whole argument against the rest of impossibility and reversal of the laws of nature falls to the ground." You could argue a lot against what he says there. The pamphlet covered miracles and modern science, viewed as natural phenomena, the evidence of the reality of apparitions, the evidence for spiritualism by men of science and literate and professional men, the theory of spiritualism and its moral teachings. He concludes the pamphlet in concluding these imperfect illustrations of a subject so generally tabooed by scientific men. I do not expect or wish to make a single convert. All I claim is to have shown cause for investigation, to have proved that it is not a subject that can any longer be contemptuously sneered at as unworthy of a moment's inquiry. I feel myself so confident of the truth and objective reality of many of the facts here narrated that I would stake the whole question on the opinion of any man of science desirous of arriving at the truth, if they would only devote 2 or 3 hours a week for a few months to an examination of the phenomena before pronouncing an opinion. For I again repeat, not a single individual that I have heard of has done this without becoming convinced of the reality of these phenomena. I maintain, therefore, finally, that whether we consider the vast number and the high character of its converts, the immense accumulation and the authenticity of its facts, or the noble doctrine of a future state which it has elaborated, the so-called supernatural, as developed by the phenomena of animal magnetism, clairvoyance and modern spiritualism is an experimental science which must add greatly to our knowledge of man's true nature and highest interests, and therefore demands an honest and a thorough examination, which is what skeptics would agree to for an investigate. But over the years, there hasn't been a lot of evidence to support Wallace's confidence at all. He was later to write that the facts became more and more assured, more and more varied, more and more removed from anything that modern science taught or modern philosophy speculated upon. The facts beat me. His emotional state seems to have settled by this time. He had married in April 1966, the same year as his pamphlet appeared, and eventually had 3 children. He continued on a path that has been described as a tale of 2 Wallaces, interspersing his thought on spiritualism and mesmerism with learned scientific papers. For instance, in 1870, a flat earth proponent named John Hampden offered a £500 wager to anyone who could demonstrate a convex curvature in a body of water such as a river, canal or lake. Wallace, intrigued by the challenge and short of money at the time, which was a problem he had throughout his life, designed an experiment in which he set up 2 objects along a 10-kilometre stretch of canal. Both objects were at the same height above the water, and he mounted a telescope on a bridge at the same height above the water as well. When seen through the telescope, one object appeared higher than the other, showing the curvature of the Earth. The judge for the wager, the editor of Field magazine, declared Wallace the winner, but Hampden, surprisingly, refused to accept the result. He sued Wallace and launched a campaign which persisted for several years of writing letters to various publications and to organisations of which Wallace was a member, denouncing him as a swindler and a thief. Wallace won multiple libel suits against Hampden, but the resulting litigation cost Wallace more than the amount of the wager, and the controversy frustrated him for years. And his emotional stability might have been once more severely tested in April 1874 by the death from scarlet fever of his oldest child, his son Bertie, who was aged 6. In that same year, Wallace visited the spirit photographer Frederick Hudson. He declared that a photograph of him with his deceased mother was genuine, despite the fact that Hudson's photographs had already been exposed, pardon the pun, in 1872 as fraudulent double exposures. In 1876, he was elected president of the biology section of the British Association for the Advancement of Science's annual meeting in Glasgow, which should have been a triumph. He gave a highly lauded presentation on the antiquity of man, but it ended in disaster when he allowed a paper on mesmerism and spiritualism to be read in the anthropology section. This was followed by what became a heated shouting match, with Wallace later lambasted in a letter to The Times, which said he had degraded the BAAS by his more than questionable conduct in allowing the paper's presentation. That's the end of part 3 of this look at Alfred Russel Wallace. But the issues continue with his delving into some of the less than scientific areas, which impacted very much on his reputation as one of the greatest scientists of the period. And that was the Skeptic magazine, June 2024, which is volume 44, number 2.
Hello, I'm Annie McCubbin. Do you have a friend who gets their dietary advice from Jade the Influencer, their financial and relationship advice from Crystal the Psychic, has detoxes and colonics from Alice the Naturopath, and thinks vaccines cause autism and made the world flat? Are you sick of trying to convince them that they're being conned? Well, argue no more. Let me do it instead. Give them the link to my podcast, Why Smart Women, and sit back with a turmeric latte and immune-boosting supplement and relax. Actually, cut the turmeric latte and immune-boosting supplement. It's pointless. Just grab a cup of tea and tune into my podcast, Why Smart Women. See you soon.
Hello everyone, this is Adrienne Hill here in Calgary, Canada. Back in Skookum Studios, and I'm going to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics Newsletter. This is newsletter number 221. And don't forget, you can sign up to this newsletter at skeptics.com.au and get the full report, complete with all the links every other week, right into your inbox. But let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this week. Hi all, says Tim. After 16 years in the job, actually it's about 20 years if you count an earlier run in the 1980s. Yours truly, Tim Mendham that is, has decided to retire as Executive Officer and Editor for Australian Skeptics Inc., effective the end of June 2025. I will continue my involvement as a member of the ASI committee, and for at least a little while as editor of this newsletter. Ooh, yay, more tongue twisters like lemon liniments. That change has allowed us to give some serious consideration to how the skeptics should be operating, to prioritize our expenditure and effort to ensure the highest level of effectiveness and impact. These include more emphasis on outreach to authorities and various public sections, including younger audiences. But another change is to The Skeptic magazine. You'll hear more about that later. In the meantime, read on. Tim. Okay, Tim. Now that is a shock. And even Psychic Penny did not see that coming. But congratulations on your retirement, Tim. It is well deserved. Skepticon 2025 Call for Papers. Skepticon, the Australian Skeptics Annual National Convention, will be returning to Melbourne for the 12th time this year on the weekend of October 3rd through 5th. The Victorian Skeptics, organisers of the event, have announced a call for papers. Quote, "We are looking forward to a broad range of participants, including first-time convention speakers, and hope to shine a spotlight on the efforts of energetic people from within our movement, as well as outstanding people from outside of our fold who have much to share with us," end quote. For more information, visit skepticon.org.au. Now this is a sad one. Skeptic magazine to close. It is with sadness that we announce that The Skeptic, the Australian Skeptics quarterly publication, is to cease publication. The magazine has been around for close to 45 years, but recent years have seen a decrease in subscriber numbers to the extent that it has been running at a loss. The ASI committee consulted with other skeptics groups with serious consideration to ways to continue publication. But it came down to a balance between costs and benefits. And sadly, the decision was made to discontinue publishing the magazine as a quarterly, subscription-based print publication in favor of a more content-rich online presence. That format will include original content that might have run in the magazine, but would now be accessed by everyone for free. People who want to contribute content to that format are more than welcome to get in touch. The last edition of The Skeptic magazine, in its current form, will be the June 2025 issue. Information about the new publication and how to access it will be provided in due course. Existing paid subscribers will naturally be reimbursed for the outstanding portion of their subscriptions. A more detailed explanation is available on the Skeptics website. Oh my. I will miss getting my Skeptics magazine. I love seeing some of my work and others' works in paper form. It's a sad decision, but I totally understand it. CSI Executive Director retires. Must be something in the water, or maybe the air. Maybe it's the chemtrails. Another long-time skeptical office bearer takes leave. The executive director of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry and the Skeptical Inquirer, and its predecessor, the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, for almost 40 years. He has announced he will be retiring as of July 4th. We hate to say it, but his departure will probably be accompanied by fireworks. And that's because it's July 4th, for those of you who don't know. Oh my, my, my. Now, Barry, I have met several times, and I have really enjoyed getting to know him and working with him over the years, and I've learned a lot from him. So I wish him the best, and I hope he stops having those nightmares before conferences. Vaccine misinformation and pregnant women. A paper from University of Antwerp looks at strategies to correct vaccine misinformation on social media for pregnant women and the impact of vaccine skepticism. 4 ways to spot a dodgy so-called expert. This Conversation article says, quote, "Few of us have the time or the capacity to verify every claim made by every so-called expert. So how can we distinguish credible experts from those that are not?" End quote. Exposing celebrity occult obsession. An ex-psychic is joined by a former New Ager to confront, quote, "the growing glamorization of occult practices such as crystals and tarot cards in pop culture, among other subjects," end quote. There might be some flies in the ointment for this podcast. The story is from a Christian publication, and the ex-psychic, quote, "was radically saved out of the occult and bondage," end quote, where she was, quote, "demonically oppressed," end quote, by Jesus Christ. Maybe this should go down in the bottom half of the newsletter. Help required. Psychics and the police. We're trying to track down the bona fide of a recent report from an English-language Spanish news site looking at the U.S. Department of Justice and CIA's confirming psychics help police solve crimes. The article includes links to a paper in the USA Department of Justice projects and to a CIA report, presented as a bare, typewritten document, both of which report the idea that the authorities do call on psychics, and they have been effective. Do any of our listeners know more? If you do, please contact him at editor@skeptics.com.au. The next and final issue of The Skeptic is in progress. It will feature a look back at the history of the magazine and other historical events. Meanwhile, the March 2025 issue is out, featuring a look at folklore, the fun, fashions, and fakes, as well as an in-depth look at 2 cancer cure influencers in the news and on TV, Wellness Woo, Cold Heart's latest definitive proof of UFOs, this week's version at least, and a full report on Skepticon XL. You can read the article on the infamous Belle Gibson in the preview of the March issue that is available on our website. Items of interest. Travel tips. So apparently there's some haunted places in India to avoid at night. "I see," says Psychic Penny. "If Kenny Biddle had the chance to go, he'd be there." There's also a little slideshow with minimal information, but probably enough for our needs. Speckles the Croc picks the Australian election winner. It chose the wrong one. Speckles' future may not be looking good. And don't mention handbags anywhere close to him. Ooh, 5 signs you've been abducted by aliens. For those of you who don't know that you've been abducted, the signs include bumps under your skin, acne, lost time, and psychic powers. Ooh, maybe that's what happened to Psychic Penny. Hence, courtesy of a psychic medium who apparently himself was abducted and probed in the 1980s. Reflexology socks. And that's S-O-C-K-S, not S-U-C-K-S, though I think it does that as well. Other than it's a nice foot rub. Now, these are patterned with appropriate touch points. And at Australian $43 and marked down from $72, it's a must-have for National Reflexology Day, which is May 27th. And is a real thing in Canada? Really? Oh dear. I think I might have to look that up. Maybe I'll go somewhere and get a nice foot massage. But I'm not paying $72 or even $43 for a pair of socks. A scientist uncovers truth about a haunted village. The village is Puckley. The scientist is Dr. Simon Morton, an associate professor of creative economies, which is about the economies of the creative arts, not fraudulent bookkeeping. And, quote, at least 4 ghost stories can be traced to real events, end quote. Some psychics say lotto win is simply divine. A so-called tarot analyst, Ursula Wania, said it was pointless to try to predict the future and that punters would be wasting their money if they consulted tarot cards, which is a bit disappointing for this South African story promoting picking numbers by tarot cards. But she must be right, because back in 2021, she predicted that a lot of people would be inconvenienced by COVID. Simply amazing. Sarcasm sign there. Shocking truth behind UFO image. Shocking because it was presented to a, quote, stunned U.S. Congress, and that it was one of the most easily and quickly debunked bits of evidence in the increasingly breathless and overblown field of UFO claims. Susan Gerbic showed me that image, and I think it was debunked pretty quickly. Check it out online if you're not sure what it looks like. Spirits with the spirits. A proposal has been made in the UK city of Wakefield for, quote, a bar themed around psychic readings and tarot, end quote, to be called Good Fortunes. Good name. We assume they already know how their proposal will go. You have to scroll halfway down the page to find this story, but don't bother, as there's not a lot more info than what's already here. Well, that's all for the newsletter this week, and I would like to finish with a summary of the after party for the We Can Reason conference, which went extremely well. We found places for 5 guests to stay with me at our home so we could take a day trip to Lake Minnewanka to see where Herman the Merman was supposedly causing trouble for boaters until 1915, when he was apparently caught and displayed at the Banff Trading Post by Norman Luxton. The merman is believed to have been purchased by Luxton on a trip to the South Pacific, not caught on the lake, and it takes the form of a typical P.T. Barnum-type human from the neck up, and the tail of a fish for the lower half. And we went to see him on display, still at the Banff Trading Post. And if you want to learn more about Herman the Merman and the history of Lake Minnewanka, which is actually fascinating, make sure you check out my article in the Skeptic Volume 44, Number 3 from September 2024. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada.
Once again to go back to those archives, those digital archives of newspapers, magazines, gazettes, periodicals, journals, and so on that are available around the world at TROVE. TROVE is the wonderful resource from the National Library of Australia, trove.nla.gov.au. Give it a go. Have a look. You never know what you'll find. Today's an interesting sort of tangent to Trove. Once again, I have raided the archives that have been sent to me by Peter Hogan in Melbourne, and he has kept wonderful, interesting things over the years, and I'm glad he did, from different newspapers. Some of them available on Trove, some of them not, but Peter has kept them, snipped them out of the newspapers and kept them in files, so now we can digitize them and keep them forever and share them. What a good idea. And today I'm going to be looking at some of the archives kept about the Australian Skeptics' testing of water divining. Now, it's hard to underestimate the importance of water divining when it comes to the formation of Australian skeptics. It was James Randi who Dick Smith flew out in 1980 to test water diviners, which turned into a TV documentary, which I saw all those years ago, which really made a big impression on me. But more importantly, having Randy's presence here, and with people like Dick Smith and Philip Adams, well, that really did lead to the formation of Australian skeptics. And it's interesting to note how many people around the world still think that water divining works, or divining in general. With pendulums and divining rods, you can see many examples on TikTok with people asking the universe or spirit some question. They'll stand there or sit there with a couple of divining rods and they'll say, "Are aliens really on the moon?" And the divining rods move. "Yes, thank you." And when you know what to look for, you can normally see them tilting their hands. And this is called the ideomotor action, where the person tilting the hands, the diviner doesn't know they are tilting their hands. Normally, sometimes they know full well they're tilting their hands. Anyway, let's have a look. Let's go back into the archives, these snippings and clippings, and what can we find? Way back in 2001, and I wasn't there was a water divining test at Mita. Now, I went the following year in 2002, and I was part of that water divining test from a documentary point of view. I made a documentary, and it's called The Mighty Mita Water Divining Test. Now, I've recently re-watched that, and the thing that it really shows more than anything else is the power of delusion. When people really think they have divining powers, how strong that delusion is, and how upset they get when it doesn't seem to work, and how they'll turn on the skeptics because they have to turn on somebody because their delusion failed them. But let's have a look in a newspaper called the Weekly Times, and I'm not exactly sure where that was published. I guess it must have been a local paper in the area of Mita in the northern part of Victoria, in the state of Victoria. Big shout out to my wonderful friends in Melbourne and Victoria. Anyway, this is from the Weekly Times, dated February the 7th, 2001. And according to the information I have with these clippings and other bits of information, the test looked like it was held on the 11th of March in 2001, the 11th of March. So this clipping is from the 7th of February, so in the lead up to the Weekly Times. And there's a photograph at the top of Russell Kelly, a local skeptic in the Mita area. Power play. Skeptic Russell Kelly is challenging diviners to prove their powers. Headline, Skeptics Dangle $100,000 in front of diviners, by Kim Woods. Water diviners across the country have been urged to dust off their fencing wire and prove their powers to claim $100,000. The prize has been offered by the Australian Skeptics, which includes media personality Philip Adams and adventurer Dick Smith, to water diviners able to prove their extraordinary ability under test conditions. The challenge will be held at the Mita Muster in northeast Victoria on March 11. The Mita Muster. This is a wonderful country fair. It's a classic piece of Australiana. Divining or dowsing has long been a part of the Australian rural culture, with farmers often consulting diviners before sinking bores. Mita aviator and Australian Skeptics member Russell Kelly is so confident the dowsers will fail, he has put up $10,000 of his own money. In the bush, there are a number of people who earn a living out of water divining because people are prepared to pay for it and believe it works. Mr. Kelly said, "They now have the chance to show their wares and put it to the test. The Australian skeptics' position is that, despite repeated tests, there is no scientific evidence to prove divining is any more than guesswork." The skeptics, mainly made up out of academics, expose pseudoscience, claims of paranormal achievements, magic such as faith healing and spoon-bending, and quackery masquerading as types of alternative medicine. The last showdown between skeptics and diviners was in Sydney in 1989, when 9 diviners failed to win a $20,000 prize after being scientifically tested on their water, metal and gold divining abilities. Mr. Kelly said diviners would be tested on locating hidden surface containers. Former farmer Rod Larson of Wodonga has been water divining throughout the northeast for more than 20 years and believes the skeptics' cache is safe. "I can only find running water in its natural state and not through pipes," he said. Now, the next clipping I has refers to that piece I just read out, but I don't have a date on it. It appears to be from the same newspaper. Yes, it's from the Weekly Times, so presumably it was a week later. So something around the 14th of February 2001. And the headline is, it's a letter to the editor, and the headline is "A Challenge for the Skeptics." And here we go. It says, "I am skeptical about the Australian skeptics' seriousness in proving the ability of water diviners. I have been a professional design engineer for over 15 years, and I believe I have a reasonable grasp of science and can pick a fraud. My father-in-law was an old-time cocky from the Riverina." Now, this is a great Australian expression, an old-time cocky. It's like a man on the land, a farmer, a weather-beaten old guy, you know. "I have seen him divine water accurately. He has never boasted about it, only ever did it for himself, and so never made a penny from divining. To him, it was no big deal. Some people could do it, some people couldn't do it. He also told me he could only detect running water underground, which concurs with your article. I challenge the Skeptics Society. You put up the money, I design the tests, and we settle the matter once and for all. Signed, John Stella, Kinglake Central." Now, that would be an interesting exercise because in 1980 James Randi did test water diviners with underground running water here in Australia. And the next letter says, "Untapped powers. I reply to Skeptics dangle $100,000 in front of diviners." Weekly Time, February 7. "Divining water is, I believe, a bit like breaking a horse. Nobody can do it until they have a go. Then most people can do it. Though I dare say water divining is a safer thing to do than breaking a horse. It's a something or nothing sort of an effort to tell the depth too." Now, that's an interesting thing. And we have examples of that, people water divining, and they say, "Right, my rod's crossed, the water's here," and they'll simply say, "How deep is the water? 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet, oh, zoop, the rods move, it's 90 feet. You dig down." It's fascinating. This correspondent goes on. "Another thing which can easily be done, but which doesn't seem to be generally known, may well be related to water divining. That is to heal animals and people using your fingers and hands and the electric current in your body." The current passing from your own body through your fingers and hands to wounded nerves rejuvenates them. And one would expect that you could measure this current in some form or another. "I healed a red heeler," and the red heeler is a dog, "when he had a 4-inch gash an inch wide in his belly, and, fair dinkum, I could hardly believe the way it stopped bleeding in a day. And the next day the wound started pulling together from one end, just like a zipper closing. The notable thing about it was the dog didn't lick the wound. It stayed completely clean, didn't ooze pus, and after a fortnight had healed completely." Well, proof positive. "My wife got a bad rope burn behind her knee when she got tangled up with a yearling Brahma bull straight out of the paddock." That sounds like an exciting life. She only had shorts on, and the rope burnt in the full width of her leg behind the knee. It was a bit like a brand. But the worst part of it was the noise she made getting it. As with the dog and other cases treated, it healed completely in a couple of weeks, with no itchiness, no blowflies, no yuck, just completely healed. Probably like the Australian Skeptics Society, there are few things I'm skeptical of, but of the qualities of the human body, I'm not. Signed, Bachelor. What a strange letter, and you have to wonder sometimes whether letters like that are put in as a gag. And next we have a cartoon, which was also from the Weekly Times, dated the 7th of February, and it's a table with what appears to be Philip Adams and Dick Smith looking on. It says $100,000 prize, and there's an old farmer divining, and he is in front of an Angus cow. And his divining rod is pointing towards the cow, and he says, "There you go, pure gold." So, there you go. Now we have what appears to be from March 14, the write-up of the test. And there's a wonderful colour picture here of a diviner in action, and the caption says, "Wide up! Corowa Police Sergeant Lionel Smith tried his water divining skills during the $110,000 challenge at the Mitta Muster on Sunday. Divine result pleases skeptics." And this is by Kim Woods. A $110,000 prize offered by Australian Skeptics Incorporated is safe after testing a world record number of water diviners at Mitta on Sunday. A total of 52 diviners or dowsers all agreed, and both sexes used an array of forked sticks, fencing wire, copper wire, and their bare hands to test their ability to divine water in surface containers on a green of the Mitta golf course. 20 2-litre bottles were filled with either tap water or sand, wrapped in brown paper, numbered and positioned in a large circle. Diviners were able to calibrate their equipment before the start and had only to identify the contents of each bottle without time restrictions. Sigrid Condon, a Mount Beauty mother — that's a nice name for a place, isn't it? Mount Beauty. A Mount Beauty mother with no divining experience upstaged the lineup of professional water diviners with the highest score of 14 out of 20 correct. Bob Nixon, Chief Inspector of the Skeptics, said all scores fell into an expected pattern of random results. The scores skewed towards failure. There were more bad scores below 10, Mr. Nixon said. We weren't surprised. It was exactly what we predicted would happen. Midway through the test, a hostile group of diviners — it's hard to imagine — demanded Mr. Nixon reposition the bottles, claiming interference from underground streams. We asked them to draw a map of the area, and 7 marked out the streams, but there was absolutely no correlation between them, Mr. Nixon said. Yes, that was an interesting exercise at the time. I remember hearing about that, and there's in fact a little diagram in these clippings. Each diviner was asked to show exactly where these underground streams were, and there were many all over the place. Each diviner came up with their own stream at random. The test was almost thrown into disarray when a dog belonging to a Skeptics member left his watery mark on one of the packages, calling a temporary halt to competition. Mr. Nixon said the event represented a new world record for the most diviners tested at the same place in one day, and the result added to the body of evidence accumulated over the past 20 years that divining is nothing more than random guessing. Berrigan dairy farmer Shane Spunner, who has divined water and power cables for 15 years, was skeptical of the skeptics' ability to stage a fair test. The test should have been made fairer by finding an area with no underground water, he said. Well, there we go. And again, it just shows the importance of keeping clippings and newspaper articles for decades, and now they're all scanned and in the archives, so they're freely available and easily distributed and researched and all the rest of it. But you don't have to have clippings in your cupboard. You can go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, type in your search, because when you go there, well, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you to those people at Patreon and PayPal who support the show, especially those at the moment in the United States, because our dollar here in Australia, it went up a little bit, but it's pretty low generally, and so your contributions go a lot further by the time they're translated into Australian dollars. Coming up on next week's show, part 4 of the 5-part series by Tim Mendham of the life and times of Alfred Russel Wallace. And speaking of Tim Mendham, oh my goodness me, this is shocking, horrible news. I don't know what we're going to do. And it's such yes, it's a pity the Skeptic magazine's coming to an end in its print form. It's going to continue, of course, online, but, you know, we can get sentimental about it. It's a very, very fine magazine, as you will know, and you can know because you can read almost every back issue at skeptics.com.au. But Tim, you're not off the hook. You're still a reporter, and we'll still get you to do books of Tim's and other reports. Also coming up on next week's show, more of Psychic Penny's horror scopes. And the Trove segment will either look at psychic detectives or a missing persons case. I guess they're sort of similar. We'll see. Now here's some news for people in New England. The New England in Australia, up Armadale Way. It's about, 5 or 6 hours up from Sydney, something like that. I will be appearing at Skeptics in the Pub along with Tim Mendham on Wednesday, May 28. Where? Welder's Dog Brewery. That sounds good. The evening starts at 5:30 p.m, where you can get your gourmet Welder's Dog pizza, or a tasty bar snack and some drinks from the well-stocked bar. Sounds even better. And then at 7 p.m, my talk, which is Secrets of the Psychics. How psychics and clairvoyants appear to be so accurate, the real truth behind claims of mystical powers and energies, plus the findings of the 12-year landmark study, the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. Yes, looking forward to this. This is my talk about lots of tricks of psychic, psychological, and otherwise. So there you go. If you're in the Armadale area and you'd like to come along, it would be great to see you. May the 28th, come along from about 5:30 p.m. to the Welder's Dog Brewery, and we'll have a lot of fun. Yes, I am bringing lots of spoons and water divining rods. But for this week, with another shout out to His Holiness Pope Leo, hope you enjoy the show. This is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
And he can deal with it. Oh, yeah. He'll bring out what he wants. Oh, and I'm still recording apparently. Hi, Richard.